More than one element or ingredient goes into making a community a strong or resilient one. We continue with a series on strong towns that we began last year that explores what characteristics make some towns overcome hardships, which could be economically driven or through a natural disaster, by taking a look at Wilmington, Vermont. Some communities lose a key business or industry, which also serve to give their town a sense of identity, and struggle with the loss of those good paying jobs for decades. In Wilmington's case, it was the impact of Tropical Storm Irene in August of 2011 that buffeted the town, flooding its downtown. But the town came back from this natural disaster, drawing upon the willingness of residents to step up and help out their neighbors, and through local leadership, whether in local government, the business community, or other social institutions or organizations. We spoke with four community leaders who gave us their take on what spurred the recovery and where the town is at now, starting with bookstore owner Lisa Sullivan, the owner of Bartleby's Books, located right on Route 9, near to where the North Branch of the Deerfield River flows through town.
So I was from Rhode Island. My husband was from Connecticut. We knew some people who had owned a house up here, and I'd been traveling for work and living. We'd been living in North Carolina and then San Francisco, and so we ended up coming here because we had traveled here and thought we'd buy a second home here. We didn't have a first home, but we thought this might be a place that we could land, and we moved here, and then we never left.
What's your sense of Wilmington like as a town? Is it the sort of place that is a resilient kind of community, would you say, or how would you characterize it?
I think it is a resilient community. I think we've had some hardship. I think certainly in Irene, in COVID, there have been a number of things. And I think it's a town where people really do the work, show up, help each other. What I've always seen is kind of an outsider at first. We've lived here 21 years, maybe. If anyone is sick, if anyone is in need of help, the town and the area really rallies around that. And so when Irene happened, it was kind of the first time I think I saw the town rally around something bigger. And it was really the rebuilding of downtown. So I do think it is pretty resilient. I think you got a lot of doers.
So the river just up the way here, that was the one that flooded out pretty badly during the storm.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Flooded
So
most of the buildings in the downtown, including this one.
This is the high water mark
That's
here?
the high water mark.
Wow.
And so I think you have some people in town who aren't necessarily in positions of authority, like in the town, who do step up. And we had an incredible amount of fundraising done. We had an incredible organization of cleanup during Irene. We had a lot of, and that wasn't necessarily just coming from people in town positions or, the top of an organization or something like that. It was just people who live here who cared. But there are some strong people and also in our government positions, our associations, like our Chamber of Commerce. I think we have good participation for the most part in our boards and our committees.
Then we met up with Gretchen Haverluck, who currently works as the economic development consultant for the town of Wilmington. She described what she did during the early days following Irene.
I immediately came in and started helping. I was volunteering for the police department who had closed off West Main Street. And so I was issuing little tags where people could enter their properties, and volunteers could go down and help muck out with proper equipment. So masks, gloves, all of those kind of things, no shorts. So I volunteered for 3 weeks doing that. And then the town of Wilmington hired me to help businesses go door to door and get them the resources that they needed. Then from there, I actually was hired by the SBDC to actually to do the same thing in Windham County and Lower Windsor County. So I did that for another year. And then the town actually hired me on as their part-time economic development consultant. So I've been working on multiple projects and really trying to bring business to our vacant buildings. We have one here across the street that has historic tax credits through the state and federal. And he's over there working, and he has a retail business coming in to start up. So all kind of exciting things. It's taken many more years than I had anticipated. However, it's really difficult because they're all still in a flood zone and they all need flood insurance. So I was very instrumental in helping Dot's Restaurant reopen and rebuild. And again, that was due to crowdfunding, like people wanted to see that come back, and people responded to that with actual money and cash. We have a huge second homeowner population here. It's actually about 70% of our grand list are second homes. And without them, they're a huge part of our community, obviously. And they really contributed a lot of money to see Wilmington come back. So after the Tropical Storm Irene, we did become a downtown designated organization, and that's called Wilmington Works. And so they have a part-time paid staff. I'm part-time paid staff. Between the two of us, we are able to really help all of Wilmington because that's my focus. And of course, the other coordinator is focused on the downtown. But bringing resources to businesses is vital. It's key. And those resources come locally. So like I stand up programs like facade improvement program, tax stabilization program, a revolving loan fund program to get people to open businesses. It's a $20,000 grant. These things are key to your local piece. Those are all paid through the 1% local option tax that we implemented again after Tropical Storm Irene. And bringing those, so from local to regional, like the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation has multiple business opportunities, resources that really help those businesses as well. And of course, state and federal programs like the tax credit, historic tax credit, and federal tax credits are key to helping a small community like ours rebuild and redevelop. And we still use all of those resources to help these new businesses. And again, I feel like we are in a transition like we were in the 70s. We have many businesses that have really aged out, and new younger people are coming in and purchasing, and it's maybe that they're recreating an older business to make it more modern. So for instance,
then we had a chance to talk with Meg Stoloff, who is currently working with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation as the manager of their Southern Vermont Economy Project. She formerly worked with Wilmington Works as a program coordinator. Wilmington Works was created in an effort to aid in restoring the vibrancy of Wilmington's downtown after Tropical Storm Irene.
I think Irene was an opportunity that we saw to kind of say, let's take this opportunity to get together and make a plan for how to have a better, stronger, more resilient town. Because, Irene was an incredibly visible disaster that literally physically kind of wreaked havoc across the downtown and the historic buildings. But there's been other kind of slow moving economic trends, demographic trends that existed before that symbolic flood that really kind of had made our whole region, and Wilmington in particular, kind of step back and take a look and say, what direction do we want to head in? Who do we want to be? How can we be more resilient? Because we can't just have, if there's a couple of bad snow seasons, and that means now we have we have less tourism, and that's made a whole bunch of businesses go out of business, or people have left town, or, looking at our just overall demographics, these things were happening. And there was already a sense of awareness in the town that like we need to figure out how to be more resilient, have a more resilient and vibrant community and economy. And so sometimes what happens is after a disaster, there was this opportunity for everybody to really pull together and get on the same page. There was funding, like always good to help put these buildings back together, but it also really helped to channel a lot of this idea that there was a need to really get organized about becoming more vibrant and resilient together. And so, that's carried on. It didn't go away after Irene. I think it really also the lessons that we learned during Irene really helped the town sail through COVID really well too, because we already had kind of an established network. We had, one of the things about having a downtown organization is that you really have contact with all the business owners. Like you've kind of formed an identity of like, hey, you are like our downtown business owners. We know who you are, and we know how to get a hold of you, so that when COVID struck, we were able to really like, hey, let's all just get on some Zoom calls and talk about what are we going to do? What are you doing? How can we get you hooked up with any assistance that you need from various funding structures? But then also like, how are we going to communicate, as town is reopening? How do we want to communicate with people that are visiting? So we took a lot of those lessons learned. And I think that's been another really good lesson too, is that like, if you create the structure in a town, like before there's a disaster, even when there is a disaster, you'll be much better equipped to handle it. So it really helped the organization and the town really sort of develop a broad base of community support from, both people who are locals who live in town and second homeowners who really love the town and visit often. We had the communication channels with them. So when there's something like COVID, or just in general, there's a downtown event, you can tell people about it. If you have a group of people who are working together towards a common goal of having a vibrant downtown and vibrant business district and making the town a place where people want to be, you can do so much for a town. And whether you're in, Wilmington, Vermont, or, a small town in, Kansas, it's really just kind of a way of saying like, we have an identity. This is a town. It's a great place. And knowing about the businesses in the town, working to keep the buildings as much as possible, owned and in repair. Obviously, you don't have total control over that, but there's things, there's resources available for tax credits and things like that to help keep buildings in redevelopment.
And finally, we stop by the Wilmington Town Hall to hear from Scott Tucker, Wilmington's town manager.
But Wilmington primarily is concentrated in second homes, about 62%, and there's a lot of restaurants here and other retail based on what tourists may like to see, and experience here. So it's a very historical town. You look around and you can see a lot of buildings that still exist. You're sitting in a historical building right now at Town Hall, but a lot of the buildings were probably built in the late 1800s here. I came on probably in 2017, but by that time most of the town had recovered. We're still working on a couple of businesses who may be getting a loan through the FEMA program and things of that nature. But by and large, everybody had recovered pretty quickly. I think within a year, in particular, a couple of years. There was a lot of stories around Dot's restaurant right across the street, and how that was torn down and rebuilt. And it's rebuilt, with the understanding that it could withstand another flood. So it sits right next to the river, and you can see how the water. There's a lot of pictures about the water coming down and around that whole area, and particularly here. I think we lost one person near the elementary school, and there's a bench over on South Main Street commemorating her life, and that was a tragic loss for the town of Wilmington. Yeah, I mean, if you look around, you can't tell. I mean, the only reason you can tell is people still remember it. It's just as vibrant to folks who've lived here all their lives. or who have had businesses downtown who had to go through that experience. But it's still in people's minds, but the recovery, I think, is pretty sound.
What do you think is the kind of the ingredient that separates communities that kind of get back on their feet again quickly after a major setback or an economic problem versus those that wallow in misery for a few decades instead?
Well, I think it has to do with the people, especially right after Irene, where people stopped. I mean, I heard stories of folks stopping with their kids just to help out. They see a lot of mud and a lot of different debris around somebody's business or home, and they just stopped and helped because they saw somebody out there, and they would ask the owner if they could help that day and things like that. So I think it's a mindset. I also think when we have so many visitors here and so many tourists and so many second homes, that people they're here for a reason. They want to get away from the larger cities and things of that nature, and they're more community minded. We have folks who have been involved in boards and committees, and select board members and school board. Many of the people who are still here living today and who've been here probably for the last 50 years or all their lives have participated in one way or another as a volunteer in local government. And so you also have the fact that I think we're in a pretty unique area with two lakes and a skiing industry and hiking and biking. There's a lot of things to do outside, and that's a lot of why people come to Vermont, is for the quality of life. I know that's an overused phrase, but truly it is the Vermont way and the quality of life that we have here that's second to none.
Strong towns and communities are built in a number of ways, with a sense of community being at the core. Local leadership is another key, both from the town government and business levels, but also, we are learning, from the willingness of ordinary folks to step up and make their contribution. These ordinary folks then become extraordinary. We'll be back to look at more communities and what makes them resilient and special. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.